I like to think of myself as a pro free speech kind of guy, and I generally am, but there are like still perhaps like I have some agreement on like the prevailing leftists that maybe some speech shouldn't be as free as other, and I'm gonna explain what I mean by it, because like I'm very like open-minded and I really want to see like open discussion in society on issues of basically what exists or what has existed or what has occurred, and also what might occur. Like I guess these are like ontological or epistemological questions, like according like there are some fancy philosophical terminology that I might be misusing, but my understanding is that ontology is like the study of what exists and also what existence is and stuff, and epistemology is like what is knowledge and what can be known and so forth. Like but maybe I like will bastardize the terms, so maybe I should avoid using them. But anyway, like I'm for basically any kind of discussion on any like scientific or historical events that can people propose. Like they should be able to discuss them openly and also like without being like ridiculed, at least not excessively, or like fear that people have to fear for their life or their job, or even fear for their just their good name or something. Because nowadays if you say the wrong things, like, well, that's always been the case, but especially nowadays, like if you say the wrong thing you can get labeled a certain way, and then people don't want to talk to you and so forth. But there are some sort of issues, mainly moral issues, where I am more skeptical of like if somebody really is promoting them, for example. And this is like one kind of example. This is from the Confused Finlanders. He's on Minds. I follow him and follow his channel or something. He's just some Finnish guy who points out some of this liberal bullshit in Finland. So anyway, there's like this girl who was 9-year-old, and it was her grandmother, I believe, who like encouraged her to take up pole dancing when she was 9, and now she's 11. And she was like number 3 in some. She got the bronze medal in some contest in Helsinki. And at least like this article, okay, I didn't read all of it, like it's from Yle, the Finnish equivalent of the BBC, like I always describe it. And at least I got the impression that this is cool, like this this girl is learning to become sexual entertainment for men. And I don't know, like why aren't the feminists complaining about this? Or I don't know, maybe at some point there is some moral qualms in this whole article, but I don't want to read it because it usually pisses me off to read mainstream media stuff. Or like another example like this, there was this article on Salon. I think they took it down, but like I'm the pedophile, you're the monsters, because at first he wrote an article about how some pedophiles are virtuous, and then people rightly didn't really agree with the message, and then they I guess criticized him, this pedophile, and all that stuff. Yeah, like I'm a pedophile, you're the monsters. And anyway, like this sort of all the especially like sexualization of children and all sorts of moral gray areas, let's say, they are acceptable nowadays. Like if you criticize it, there's something wrong with you. But when it comes to issues of like, history and science, if you criticize certain theories or promote another theories, you are the problem. And this is like the wrong way around. Because like, I think we should be very intolerant when it comes to like especially sexualization of children, and there is like some sort of discussion to be had, like I guess in the Middle Ages people sometimes got married when they were 13, maybe even younger, maybe in 11 years old, and nowadays I think in Islamic countries they can't get, some girls get married when they're 11 or something, and maybe it's a more natural way of doing it. There could be like a place for discussion for matters like this, but overall I don't really trust anybody who really wants to, like, who thinks this is like a pertinent issue, that we have to tackle this issue because like society is out of whack because 11-year-old girls cannot get married. Like, yeah, I just think it's some sort of pedophile or other kind of pervert who wants to promote more perversion and pedophilia and anything, LGBTQ agenda and all of this. These are basically just moral weather waning, or like flip-flopping, having no moral standards or anything, and it is ruining society very much that we don't have no moral standards. But on the other hand, in contemporary society there's like stuff like UFOs, and I don't mean flying saucers necessarily. UFO means unidentified flying object, and because the term exists, we can be sure that UFOs exist. Now, I'm not convinced that they are like spacecraft piloted by extraterrestrials from other worlds. Like, they could be, but I doubt it. But I do think that UFOs exist, and they could be weather balloons or other mundane things. They could be extraterrestrials, they could be something completely different, they could be some sort of spiritual entities, they could be something paranormal, something, some interdimensional, or something completely different that nobody really has like even theorized properly about. All I know that as far as I know, the phenomenon exists, and also does like a so-called alien abduction, and I don't know whether it's usually associated with the UFO phenomena, but I don't know if it's actually related or it's just related in people's minds, because like I don't know if people are really abducted by some sort of these alien beings that might be, whether they're demons or extraterrestrials or like the government in disguise, I don't know. But all I know that people do seem to have these experiences and stuff, and my point isn't really to promote UFOs, but this is like one of the most obvious examples of things that you're not allowed to like talk about openly. And this is like an issue, like an so-called ontological issue, if I understand the term correctly. Like, you should be like this phenomenon exists, and like certainly many people have studied it, but I don't think they have really like gotten that far in really understanding what it's about. Like, maybe some have, but this is like a thing that we should basically just, so like you shouldn't be ridiculed. Like if somebody says like, I think UFOs are alien spacecraft piloted by aliens from another planet, like, okay, what's your evidence for it, or how do you argue for it? Or somebody says like, no, they're all like people just over their imagination running wild, they're seeing weather balloons or marsh gas or whatnot. And okay, what's your evidence for it? Or like, oh no, they're actually, fallen angels from another dimension here to deceive mankind. Like, okay, what's your evidence for this? Like, but of course, like, you want to talk about this, you're labeled, you're crazy, conspiracy theorists, whatever. And like another thing is like, this, flat earth, or like flat earthers call, some flat earthers call people who believe in the globe earth bald hearts, and people who believe in the globe earth call flat earthers flat hearts. And of course, like, some degree of banter between some sort of opposing groups is natural and it's not bad, but like, certainly both on both sides of this argument that you see, people resorting to all sorts of insults and stuff like that instead of actual arguments, because like this is a pertinent question of what exists, or like what is the nature of something that exists. Like, we can be quite sure that the earth exists, and well, it seems that not everybody agrees, and the fact is that I'm pretty sure whoever you are who's listening to me now, you haven't been like, up in outer space to see the actual shape of the earth, so you don't know whatever it is. So maybe it's the earth is shaped like a duck. But my point is that, once again, why can't we just discuss these things like, adults? Because these shouldn't be issues that you take emotionally. Unlike something like this sort of makes me, children, young girls becoming pole dancers. It sort of like angers me, or like, pedophiles writing articles how you should, praise them or whatever. Like, no, that sort of stuff should like inflame you emotionally, or like, the stabbing thing in Finland, or any other like terrorist attack or whatever. Like, I think those they are somebody doing something very immoral. That's when you should get somewhat inflamed. Like, don't get overly emotional. Like, don't get consumed by hatred, so you just don't think. But like, I do think, like, you gotta get mad, like in the movie The Network. The first thing, like, you don't know what's the actual solution to this problem, but first you have to recognize there's a problem and get mad. And this is like how you should, I guess this should be the catalyst in like moral issues like sexualization of children. But it's not so much a moral issue, like what is the shape of the earth, or what is the UFO phenomenon, or like even like, how did the universe or the earth came to be, like whether you believe in Big Bang or Genesis, or like even those, like, they say like, Big Bang is science, and if you don't believe it, you're dumb, or you're creationist. Well, I'm not dumb. Like, well, I'm a human being. I'm dumb in that sense, because I do think, yeah, but I'm not a creationist, certainly. But like, well, this isn't science. It's a scientific theory at best, like Big Bang. Nobody was there whenever the Earth came to be, or the universe, whether it was like 60 billion years or 6,000 years or 6 days ago. Like, you weren't there. Well, okay, if it happened 6 days ago, then it would be more like a, Matrix Dark City kind of scenario, where you've been alive only 6 days, but you think you've been alive for decades at least. But okay, that's another thing. But like, this is, once again, it should be an issue of something we should be able to discuss, whether it exists, or like, whether God exists or not, like, without getting too emotional about it. Like, okay, at least like in maybe some circles, people do discuss it somewhat openly, like whether God exists or that. Like, nowadays in the Western world, I guess, like, the question of God is sort of like, yeah, let those Christians talk about it in their church, but as long as they don't, talk about it in, public or on TV, it's fine. But like, no, you shouldn't drink God. So it's like, because they imply that God does not exist, and well, yeah, I think it's bullshit. I'm not saying that the Bible is necessarily the correct or the incorrect account of God. I just do think that, yeah, God does exist, or at least like is the only basically logical explanation for the existence of the world, or things in general. But that's another story. But once again, this is like a thing that people should be able to talk about without getting labeled a certain way. Like, I don't know, like in some workplaces, like if people are, for example, too openly Christian, how will, like, maybe it would adversely affect their career or something. If they say that, I don't believe in evolution, and I believe that the world was created in 6 days, and on the 7th day God rested, and stuff like that. Like, there's like crazy. But the fact is, you don't fucking know. You don't know how or when the Earth was created or how it was formed. Like, we have some theories, but nobody was there to like take a video of it. And then, of course, there's like certain historical events that you're not allowed to question, especially related to World War II. And it's not like in some countries, it's even illegal to question certain events related to World War II. But like in most countries, at least in the West, it's at least considered immoral. Like, if you bring questions about certain events that happened or allegedly happened, like they say, like, oh, okay, he must be a Nazi, or promoting that is because you want to murder 6 gazillion Jews or whatever. Like, no, maybe you just notice, like, wait, some things don't make sense, or like, you want to question, like, okay, like, I do think this is probably true, but these few details are like, a bit hazy, and I'd like source, please. But no, you can't do that. And these are like these issues that I mentioned. I don't think they are like, for me at least, I think these issues that I mentioned, like these things, they're something that there are some good arguments from various different sides, and you shouldn't just dismiss it. But certainly, I'm not saying that you should just whenever somebody makes an argument on the internet, that you should be, give it the light of day or something. You should look into it. Like, no, if you don't find it pertinent, you of course have if you don't find the argument to, be made in honesty, or you just think it's like, or you really do think that it's just somebody who is sort of cuckoo in the head, like, sure, you're free to, like, ignore what they're saying. And of course, like, the whole concept that there is such a label as a conspiracy theorist is completely ridiculous. Like, another thing, that you're not supposed to talk about the fact that the word conspiracy exists because human beings do conspire. Like, well, once again, the stabbing here in Finland, in Turku, like a bit over a week ago. At first it was like, okay, it was a lone guy, but now at least, like, the police have arrested some other people, and there might be accomplices, so they are suspecting conspiracy. And I don't know if it was a conspiracy or not, and I haven't read all of the latest news about it, but it shouldn't be any big deal to suggest that something might have been a conspiracy. Like, it's completely ridiculous to even, like, that, that there is all this, emotional manipulation when you question, like, or if somebody thinks that they, Illuminati exists, okay, like, then why do you think so? Please provide evidence. But the society teaches you, like, conspiracy theory, she's crazy. Like, I don't know if the Illuminati exists or not. That's not the point. It's like, they're making an argument that something exists that is not obvious. Like, most people have seen dogs, they have been on an airplane and so forth, so they know that, dogs exist, airplanes exist, so forth. So there is no question, but something like the Illuminati or like, UFOs, that is, there is no clear and easy answer to them. So I think it makes sense to like ask questions and debate and so forth over these issues, but not in our society. And it's not really so much, well, to a certain degree it is because society is dumbed down. But once again, like I said a lot of similar stuff in my previous video, like of hug boxes great and small or something to that extent. But I don't know, I just like this is a very simple difference between like two kinds of issues, like moral issues like this, sexualization of children, and issues of things that exist or not don't exist. Like these should not be emotional, like not greatly emotional. Like of course, if somebody has been, I don't know, written, like done decades of research on the globe model or the flat earth model, and then somebody is saying that, no, everything you have written is wrong, sure, I can understand somebody getting emotional about it, but still, ultimately, it really shouldn't be too emotional. Like, these should be questions of science. But in our society, because society is so cowardly, because, well, many of these things scare you and they make you feel embarrassed. Like, what if the Earth wasn't spherical as we are told, and then you feel dumb, or like, what if there are some sort of entities we know nothing really about, and it scares you, the possibility. So that's the point. Like, UFOs represent something that you don't know about, and that's like, the unknown scares people, so it's easier to ignore, like pretend it doesn't exist and laugh it off, like people who bring it to your, like, it's a classic case of shooting the messenger, or like, people don't want to admit how conspiratorial their governments are. Like maybe it's not like the most, out there conspiracy theorists make it out to be, but certainly governments, corporations, people in high places in power, they have conspired for millennia to, control people, to gain more power. It's just how human beings tend to operate. It shouldn't be a big deal, but most people, especially nowadays, because we think we have democracy and we can affect the government and whatnot, even though we really can't. Like, people don't want to admit it to them because it's scary, and people are fucking pussies, they're fucking cowards. That's the point, and and you don't want to get labeled anti-Semitic, so you don't want to say certain things, and these are just certain issues that should not be, like, it's not really an issue of morality. Well, then it is like if there is, like, big lies in history books, for example, then it's an issue of morality. Like if people have deliberately lied about something, but if you just, disagree with a, commonly accepted fact, it shouldn't be like an emotional issue. Like maybe you should actually ask somebody like, hey, that's not what I saw on the news, that's not what I learned in school, why do you think so? And of course you don't have to believe them immediately, but at least you should keep an open mind. And this is how free speech, free thought is supposed to work, but it doesn't. And like even most people who claim to be free speech and free thought, they don't really live up to these ideals themselves, at least not according to my observations. But yeah, I am agreeing somewhat with the left that some things shouldn't be too free to talk about. Like especially, like, I guess in a more responsible society, you could talk about stuff like this more openly, but I just think it's blatantly obvious that, you know, whatever, like relating to sexuality, gender, and stuff that, you know, all these big organizations and media and so forth, but whatever they're pushing, they are doing it for some political agenda. And it's obviously a nefarious agenda, otherwise they wouldn't be, like, you know, pushing it and using so much money and effort on it. And like, yeah, and this is like people don't seem to take, like, the average Joe doesn't seem to take this sort of stuff as, like, a, you know, emotionally. And but they do think, like, oh, you believe in UFOs, you think in governments, I guess you believe in reptilian shapeshifters too. Like, I don't, but, like, hey, if you have some evidence, I'd like to hear it. But, like, yeah, it's all reversed. Like, these things should be emotional issues. These shouldn't. It's simple.